Thank you very much, operator. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ann Morse, and I am the Program Director for the National Conference of State Legislatures Immigrant Policy Project and the Task Force on Immigration and the States. NCSL has been focused on the state and local role in immigrant policy since 1992, providing research and analyses on federal immigration policy, state and local innovative programs, and state legislation related to immigrants. Please visit our website at www.ncsl.org/IMMIG, I-M-M-I-G. I'd love to welcome everybody today to our webinar on immigrants in the workforce, legal immigration, and national economic impact. NCSL gratefully acknowledges the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation for sponsoring this webinar. This is the third in our Immigrant Policy Project's 2015 webinar series. Our next webinar will be held on June 5th at 3 p.m. Eastern with another discussion of immigrants in the workforce with a focus on state-level studies and examples of state legislation. Please visit ncsl.org/IMMIG to register for free. Also, we value your feedback. After each webinar, please fill out our survey and let us know what was valuable and how we can do better. I'm going to begin today's webinar with a brief introduction today to the legal immigration system in the United States, the visa system for permanent and temporary admissions at the national level, before turning the program over to our two guest experts on economics and immigration. That will be Laura Collins with the American Action Forum, who will provide an overview of economic studies of immigration in the United States, and Giovanni Perry from the University of California at Davis, who will delve into one of the visas that's often in the news, the H-1B or the high-tech visa. We will hold a question and answer session following the presentations. For those joining us via the web, please feel free to use the chat box in the lower left part of your screen to submit any questions ahead of time. We have provided the PowerPoints and other resources for you that you may download at any time during this webinar. Simply click on the Media Library icon in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. It looks like a yellow piece of paper with a blue bar graph in front of it, and you'll find a list of documents that you may download. We've also provided key resources on our webinar homepage. So before we turn to our presenters, here are a few basics about the U.S. immigration system. The United States immigration system is governed by the Immigration and Nationality Act of the U.S. Code. The last major overhauls of legal immigration were in 1986 and 1990. There are two main paths for legal admission to live and work in the United States. This is the permanent visa, otherwise known as the green card, for family reunification and for employment purposes. U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents can petition for family to join them in the United States. There are 6 different categories of admission for family reunification. Employers can also petition for needed workers. There are 5 categories of permanent employment visas. For family, the 6 include immediate family, where there is no cap. Spouses, unmarried children under 21, and parents may enter the United States to rejoin family without limit. For 5 categories of extended family members, there is an annual cap of 266,000 visas. In employment, the 5 categories include priority workers, professionals with advanced degrees or exceptional ability, skilled workers without advanced degrees and needed unskilled workers, special immigrants such as religious workers, and immigrant investors. For this, there is an annual cap of 140,000 visas per year for employment-based permanent admission. In 2013, just under 1 million people were granted lawful permanent resident status. There were 990,000 visas issued. 2/3 of these visas were granted on the basis of family, 650,000. For employment, 160,000 visas were issued, or about 16% of the total. There are also smaller streams of immigrants who arrive and are allowed to stay permanently. These include the diversity visa, for countries that have fewer than 50,000 lawful permanent resident admissions in previous years. That's about 5% of the total. And finally, refugees and asylees can adjust to permanent status after some time in the United States, and that accounts for 12% of the total. It's important to note, because of these annual limits on visas, there are long wait times for visa petitions to be reviewed. There is also a per-country cap. No more than 7% of visas can be issued to a single country a year. For example, brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens applying from the Philippines, the State Department is currently reviewing applications first filed in 1993. For employment of skilled workers in the 3rd preference employment visa category, those applying from India, the State Department is currently reviewing applications first filed in 2004. As of November 2014, About 4.4 million visa applications were pending. According to the State Department, 16 countries represent 82% of those visas, with the top five countries being Mexico with 1.3 million, Philippines with 428,000, India with 323,000, Vietnam with 259,000, and China with 243,000. Finally, there is a category called temporary immigrants or non-immigrants, who are people lawfully admitted for a temporary period of time and for specific purposes. There are 24 major categories and more than 70 specific visas for non-immigrants. In 2013, 61 million non-immigrants were admitted. The largest category is temporary visitors for pleasure, 48 million or 79%, and the second largest temporary visitors for business, 6 million visas or 10%. About 5% of total non-immigrant visas are for temporary workers and their families. One of the most common visas are the H-1B visas for professional specialty workers, such as high-tech occupations, and the H-2A and H-2B for seasonal workers. The H-1B visa is capped at 65,000 visas per year, plus 20,000 visas for those with master's or higher education. Now, let us turn to our guest speakers. Our first speaker is Laura Collins, who is the Director of Immigration Policy at the American Action Forum. A former practicing attorney, Laura joined the forum after serving as a senior research analyst at the Republican National Committee, focusing on immigration and judiciary issues. She also worked on cooperative federalism and energy and environmental issues as policy analyst for the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Our second speaker will be Giovanni Perry. He is professor of economics at the University of California at Davis and director of the Temporary Migration Cluster at UC Davis. He is also a research associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and editor of Regional Science and Urban Economics. He is on the editorial board of the Journal of the European Economic Association and the Journal of Population Economics. He is published in the American Economic Review, Review of Economic Studies, Review of Economics and Statistics, the Economic Journal, and the Journal of European Economic Association, and he has been featured by the New York Times, Washington Post, Economist, Wall Street Journal, Los Angeles Times, and several popular blogs, websites, and radio shows. His research focuses on the impact of international migration on labor markets, housing markets, productivity, and innovation in receiving countries, and on the determinants of international migrations. Now let's get started. Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anne. In the United States, we do not typically think of immigration policy as economic policy. We don't use it as a tool for economic growth. Most of our immigration historically has been focused on family reunification, but at AAF we believe that good immigration policy good economic policy, and it's a pro-growth agenda. And there are three things that can happen out of that. We can grow the economy, we can create jobs, and we can improve our long-term fiscal health. So we did a study, and one of the things we found is that benchmark immigration reform can raise the pace of economic growth by 1%. It can raise GDP per capita by $1,500, and it can reduce the federal deficit by $2.5 trillion. And these are big numbers. And one of the things that one of the reasons we think this is that immigration can help in one really big respect, and that in the United States we do not have a high enough fertility rate to replace our current population. So if we're able to bring in immigrants, bring in workers, we're able to keep that rate high enough to replace our current population, our labor force will not shrink and our economy will not contract. Immigrants also have higher birth rates, so it's not just bringing in more people, it's also bringing in people who are more fertile. They have higher labor force participation rates, higher entrepreneurship rates, and all these things sort of work together to compound these economic effects. When we talk about job creation, regional economic models, an economic model firm, also known as REMI, they did a study where they took the 2013 Senate immigration bill and they took just the temporary visas, and they said if we were to actually increase the number of temporary visas available by the amounts that the Senate bill increased them, what would be the economic impact? And they found some pretty big numbers in terms of job creation. As you can see from the slide, If you increase the H-1B visa program, you create an additional 227,000 jobs in just 1 year and 1.3 million jobs by 2045. That's a lot of job creation. The H-2A visa, the agricultural visa, the numbers are considerably smaller in terms of job creation, but it's still positive. And the H-2B visa, low-skilled temporary workers, also smaller numbers, but still positive. And it also took a look at what that bill would have created, a hypothetical guest worker program. And that would also be for low-skilled temporary workers. And that's a huge number too, 365,000 jobs by 2045. And so just using, a hypothetical number, we do find that immigration has the ability to help us create jobs, and that's really important in our economy. Third, when we look at fiscal health, immigrants typically are low users of federal benefit programs, but like all of us, they pay taxes, and so we're able to get their tax revenue, and they don't take from our society. In 2009, the average foreign-born adult paid $8,000 in taxes, but they received less than $4,500 from major government programs. So they are a net revenue for us. And like we saw with the H-1B, when you have an immigrant with an advanced degree, the higher skill, that effect is compounded based on their skill level. They pay $22,000 in taxes, and they only receive about $2,300 in major government programs. Immigrants are a huge boost to our economy, and we really believe here at AAF that if we were to change our focus from a more family reunification-based immigration policy to a more skills-based, economically focused policy, that we would see these positive economic impacts. We are one of the few countries that we can, on a similar level to us, that don't do this. Australia, the UK, Canada, all of their immigration systems are very employment-focused, and ours is not. And so we lose out on that ability. If we were to reform our programs to be more economically focused, we could take advantage of these potential gifts that immigrants have to give us. And now I'm going to turn over to Giovanni to talk more about the H-1B program.
Thank you very much, Laura. And now, Giovanni, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Laura and Anne. Yes, so I will talk a little bit about the specific details of the H-1B program and its economic impact as it comes from research that I have done in the last 5 to 10 years. So the key issue for an economist is how do immigrants help or don't help the economy, the productivity, the wages, and the employment of the U.S. In particular, today I'm going to talk about this highly skilled immigrant worker, which sometimes I will refer to as STEM workers, if you can follow the slides as I talk about that. The STEM workers, which are science, technology, engineering, and math, enter in large part in the United States through the H-1B visa program. It is a temporary program, but it's calculated that about 40 to 50% of them, of those who enter this program, then have become permanent citizens of the U.S. And out of them, about 60% do computer-related jobs. So they have a huge component of the computer revolution that has happened in the last 2 decades in the United States. And 85% of them have a job in science, technology, or math. So the question is, how have they affected innovation, productivity, and wage in the U.S.? This bar chart just shows you the growth of STEM workers as a percentage of total labor force in the United States. The red part are the U.S.-born, and the blue part are the foreign-born. So you see that especially from 1990, most of the growth in this total number of workers who do STEM is really due to foreign-born. They were 1/10 of the total in 1980. Now they are about 1/4, 1 out of 4 science, technology, and engineer in the US with a college degree is a foreign-born. So it's a big number. In this table, I show a little bit the evolution of the program, the H-1B program in the last 15 years. So bear with me here. Let me see if I can use one of these tools. No, my God, what happened here? In the first column, you have the years. In the second column, you have the cap, the total, the maximum number of visas which have been allowed. So as you see, the H-1B visa program was expanded in 2001 to 195,000, and then was brought down drastically in 2003 to 65,000, just to increase by 20,000 in 2006 because of these 20,000 people who have a U.S. degree. And if you look at the next column, you see that all the visas, these are the unused visas, all the visas have been used even in the year of the deep recession in 2010, 11, they have been used. But interestingly, in the next column, you will see how many days in the year did it take to exhaust, to use up all these visas as employer were applying. And you see that in the early year, it will take 323 days in 2004, 184, 132. And then in 2008 and 2009, in 3 days and 7 days, in the first week in which these visas were available, they were all completely exhausted. And then after the recession, with the recession, there was a slowdown, so they were still all taken up, but they took some more days. And now in 2014 and 15, again, in the first week, they are all exhausted. If you see the last column says that in those years, there was a lottery, and in particular in 2008 and 2009, all visas were given through a lottery because there were so many applications in the first week that about twice as many people applied, so that there had to be a lottery to give them. I will get back to the lottery in a little while. The question that I will address are specifically, did these foreign-born who came in through H-1B help innovation and growth in the U.S.? Did they help then this innovation and growth to translate into more productivity, so more employment and more wages for American workers? Or did they mainly take the base of American scientists and engineers, crowd them out so that we're no better off with them than we would have been without them? So I'm going to do a little bit of an overview of a couple of other studies. I would say the evidence line up really nicely here that economists have looked at. And if I can summarize it in a word, is that we don't find any evidence of these scientists crowding out or replacing American one, but rather we see a lot of evidence of them growing innovation, productivity, and the economy. This slide is about one study which was done in 2010 that was using differences in H-1B and foreign scientists across U.S. states, and was looking at the impact on patenting, which is on innovation. And he found that foreign-born increased innovation per capita by 12 to 15% in states where they were particularly abundant. The interesting thing of this study, though, is that they didn't just increase innovation, but they also increased the innovation rate of U.S.-born. So not only we have more innovation because these people are here, but given that they talk, they interact, they work with other American scientists, this can increase the productivity of them too. So the last bullet point says that the probability of patenting of American workers increased as a consequence, or in states where there were particularly large inflow of these workers. A related study in 2010 also looked at this across American cities. 281 metropolitan areas were analyzed between 1995 and 2007. And here they explicitly looked at how the increase in the H-1B cap affected innovation, patenting in the city. And the first bullet point again says that this increased innovation of, especially from Indian and Chinese, which are two ethnicities very active in the H-1B visa program, and increased the innovation of these two groups more in cities where these foreign-born were present more. So 3% in cities with a medium dependence on foreign, but 10% in cities with top, high dependence on this foreign scientists. And then the second bullet point confirms the idea I gave you before, not only foreigners did innovation, but the native workers in those cities were more innovative as well. American scientists increased their productivity by 18% when you had this inflow of 10% more H-1B workers. This is just a graph that shows how important have become Chinese, Indian, and Hispanic inventors in the US from 1990. This is the share of innovation or of patents which is done by this group. And as you see, from 1990, it has increased significantly. If you add them up together, now they count for about 1/3 of the total innovation that takes place in the United States. Now let's come to my work. Yes, innovation has been increased. Science and technology are definitely stimulated. But does this translate into growth of the economy, growth of wages, growth of employment? In a study so here is incorrect, it's not 1995. We just published this study in 2015. That we wrote, we again looked at the presence of foreign STEM workers across American cities, and we estimated that when their number increased by 1% of employment, the actual wages and of native highly skilled, so native college educated, increased by 7 to 8 percentage points. And the increase in wages is also there for non-college educated, but is smaller, it's 3-4 percentage points. And we didn't find any crowding out in employment. So the employment of native was remaining similar. Even of native scientists and engineers. So these estimates imply that the only way of having employment and wage growth is through increasing the productivity of the American economy. That these scientists have a significant impact on productivity. This is a scatter plot that sort of puts in a visual the number that I gave you. On the left-hand side, you see a scatter plot of, on the horizontal axis, the growth of foreign STEM, so how many more of these foreign H-1B people a city has, and on the vertical, the growth of wage of native college educated. So you see this nice and quite tight positive relationship. Cities that attract more of these people have American college educated workers earn more, increase their wage, which is a measure of their productivity, so increase their productivity. The right graph is the same for less educated. So less educated are also helped, but a little bit less by the inflow of these highly skilled. I will say why in a second. These are the numbers. These are the table of estimates. I can go quickly here, but this positive number, you see, are the effect, the header of the column says on weekly wage of native college educated, 1 percentage point more of foreign born increases their wage by 8%. That's a big increase. And column 4 and 5 show you that they don't have impact on employment very much. So employment of native increases a little bit. They don't displace, but in this estimate, it was not statistically significant. There were no stars. So big impact on productivity. The last study I want to talk about, which I think is the more interesting, is because it uses this lottery. And this lottery is something that is happening again. In 2007 and 2008, as I mentioned, 120,000 applications for this H-1B visa were received in the very first week. And so as a consequence, only 65,000 per year were given randomly. The fact that they were given randomly is interesting because it allows us to see which city were lucky and got many of them, and which cities were unlucky and got few of them, and then follow this city over time. To see if this created effect on jobs and wages of America. This random variation, and I emphasize random, is very important because clearly that's the cause of what comes after in terms of impact on the cities. We look in particular at what is the impact of the 2007 and 2008 lotteries on employment of foreign born and employment of native and wages of native. So clearly having more foreign-born, more visa will generate an inflow of foreign-born, but did it create jobs for native Americans, for U.S.-born Americans? For U.S.-born, did they create increasing wage for U.S.-born? And here we focus on computer workers in the computer sector, which is the sector mostly affected. Let me describe this graph, which gives you an idea, and then I will tell you the number. So this graph shows on the horizontal axis is how many visas you applied for and were denied. So how many visa a city wanted to get but didn't get? How many were denied by the lottery? And on the vertical axis is how many jobs for college-educated Americans in the computer sector the city created. Now, if it was true that one of these visa jobs would take away one job for American, you would have observed a scatter plot all aligned in a very positive and diagonal way. So one more denied visa will force a company to go and hire in America. And so one more on the horizontal is one more on the vertical. To the contrary, what you see is a pretty flat, but the line is slightly negative, which means that company that did not get the visa for the foreign-born also created a few less jobs for American computer workers. And this is, again, is based on the lottery. And here is the numbers that we estimated through the lotteries. And read through the first line. Here we aggregate all U.S. cities. Essentially, the lotteries, because of this much smaller number of H-1B, denied to firms about 300,000 computer workers, the first number in the first column. That was the excess demand. They were denied. This denial of 300,000 visas, essentially, that were applied, costed costed 207,000 jobs to foreigners, which means that firm found other way to hire some of those, but they still lost 200,000 foreign workers because of that. But what is even more stunning is the next column that says, because of not hiring these 200,000, they also decreased the hiring of native workers by 63,000 workers. And the last two columns essentially say that for each visa denied, there is a 0.2 American job in computer lost. So every 5 visa denied, 1 job in American computer work, in the computer sector seems to disappear. Why? Why is that? And then let me go to the confusion. Well, because first of all, foreign computer workers and H-1B do some tasks in production which are a bit different from what the Americans do. They are in large part software developers, and the Americans specialize in another job. So rather than taking away, you need both of these type of jobs to work. That's why when one immigrant foreign H-1B come in, you create one more job. Second, they are high quality. You can choose and select, given that this number is small and there are a lot of people who want to come in the U.S., really high quality engineer who can push the quality, the innovation. They can help firms to produce high quality research and expand lab and expand demand for what the natives do. And finally, they allow the firms to take on big, complex tasks and jobs. And on these big, complex tasks and jobs, the firm would also hire some Americans. So bottom line here is that in my research, I seem to emphasize and find that foreign STEM help American innovation, and in particular, they help American productivity and wages. Through what? Through increasing the productivity of American company and benefiting a lot the native workers as well on top of the firm. And so the lottery, the visa rationing or the visa restriction that was in place and is still in place in terms of H-1B has a cost in growth of the economy, but not just in growth of the economy, in growth of employment and wages of American, even in the computer sector, workers, and certainly other Americans. That's my presentation, and I give back the floor to Anna, I think, for questions and answers at this point.
Thanks so much, Giovanni, and don't go anywhere because the first question is for you. Oh, I lost you.
Okay.
Thanks for coming back. So we'll open it up to the audience for questions. Please use the chat box in the lower left part of your lower left part of your screen if you have a question. The first question for Giovanni is, there has been some criticism of the H-1B program in the past. Could you please address those concerns?
Yes. So I think the main criticism of the H-1B visa has been pointed to the fact that this program creates an underclass, if I can say, of worker because it constrains one worker to a firm and gives the option of opportunity to the firm to exploit a little bit the worker. Now, the H-1B visa program is not perfect, and I am the first advocate for some changes. And I would say, however, that two things are very important. First, we need to see what are the consequences of losing the positive as much as well as the negative if we reduce or scale down. And I think the economic cost and value that I put up are huge benefits that one has to think about. Can the H-1B visa be improved? Yes, absolutely. It has already in part. So for instance, portability, mobility of H-1B worker across firms. This would be great because it increases the competition across firms, and so a firm cannot squeeze or exploit or hold captive one worker. That's very important. Second, increasing the number will also increase the competition, so firm will not have to gobble up this visa at the beginning, and some of them are using some critical rights. Some of them try to get as many as they can at the beginning, and then they serve as middlemen between the firm that actually uses the visa and hiring this group. All these anomalies, I would say, and which create some of the problem and the critics, can be solved by increasing the number, making them more portable, more transferable. And also, I think the other important thing would be to try to connect the H-1B visa to the potential of becoming permanent. So increasing, as Laura was saying very well, increasing also the option of some of these workers to stay permanently. So increase the number of green cards which are given to these specialty workers so that once the H-1B expires, they can become permanent residents. So I am also an advocate of changing and improving some of the H-1B visa. But I think that the benefit is big, and step number one is not scaling it down, but scaling it up and improving it if we want to fix some of the problem that the critics have mentioned.
Very understandable. Thank you so much, Giovanni. Laura, this next question is for you. Could we have you come back to the screen, please? Hi, Laura, thanks. It seems unclear when and if Congress will address immigration reforms, but in anything, stranger things have happened. If they do, what are some of the proposals related to this program that are on the table?
Well, I think a lot of the proposals that have been sort of filed time and again do have to do with increasing skilled workers and moving towards a more employment-based system. In particular, one of the things that I'm really interested in are the bills that propose to give foreign students who earn advanced degrees at American universities green cards. Currently, these students have to, their student visa won't allow them to work postgraduate, so they have to apply for one of the very limited H-1B visas, as Giovanni's presentation showed us. If they're not lucky enough to get one of those, they have to go home, and then they can't work here. We've already educated them. They're here. They want to contribute to our society. So we should find a way to make the process easier for them. There are some proposals out there that propose allowing those people to immediately start applying for green cards to become permanent residents. If we can't get those passed, a lot of those workers end up going to our competitor nations, Canada, Australia, and the UK. Some of the other ones propose to just lift caps, increase the number of visas available, increase the number of employment-based green cards available. The Senate immigration bill obviously raised caps on all of them. One of the things that I haven't seen as much of are some bills to sort of strip away the regulatory burdens. AAF did an analysis of the regulatory burdens on businesses for hiring temporary workers, and it found that it's several hours worth of paperwork, several months worth of wait time, and can be up to $2,000 or more in payment just to try to hire a foreign worker. And so I'd like to see some legislation that addresses some of the inefficiencies in the system in addition to lifting the cap.
Thanks, Laura. That was wonderful. I do not see any more questions coming in, so that concludes today's webinar on immigrants in the workforce, legal immigration, and national economic impact. NCSL thanks the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation for sponsoring this event. I would like to thank Giovanni and Laura Carlos for their very informative and helpful presentations. And for those who joined late or would like to listen again, NCSL will post this recording. NCSL will post this recording online early next week. As a reminder, our next webinar in our 2015 Immigration Webinar Series will be held Friday, June 5th at 3 p.m. Eastern, focusing on immigrants in the workforce at the state level. For additional details on how to register, please visit ncsl.org/IMMIG. You will be receiving an email shortly directing you to a short survey, and we ask you please complete as we do value your feedback. Additionally, for those who have not already done so, we highly encourage you to register for NCSL's 2015 Legislative Summit, August 3rd through 6th in Seattle, Washington, at ncsl.org. This concludes today's webinar, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Have a great weekend.